Welcome to Trinity Wesleyan Church Online. We are so glad to have you here today. We've been praying for you, and we're excited for what God is going to be speaking to you today.
Already missing summer vacation? Just because summer is over, doesn't mean you can't keep dreaming of a salty sea. Put on your life jackets and set sail as we hear from Jesus' teachings. Sit back, relax, and set sail too. Seize the day.
We are in a new series called Seize the Day. And I came up with this series as I was sitting at Kitts Hummock, not far from the Air Force Base, over on the shore. I'm at Kitts Hummock and I'm praying, this was months ago, for this series. And I didn't take my phone or my watch. I had no distractions. I just brought my camping chair and I just sat up next to the sand by all the dead horseshoe crabs because there's so many there. And I start asking myself questions like, where does our church need to go? God, what do you want to tell our church? And I'm praying, I'm asking God questions. And I don't feel like this answer is always true, but I felt like it was a sign. And from the last series, we talked about different ways, the sacred pathways, and how to connect with God. And I'm a naturalist, like we learned from the Worthy series. Like I connect with God where there's clear water, moving water, there's just peace and tranquility, and I see God through His creation. But I kind of go in and out of most of the sacred pathways depending on the season. So anyway, I'm sitting in the camping chair and there's sand fleas. They're getting me. They were all over me. It was just frustrating. The sun was super bright. There's dead horseshoe crabs all around, but I still felt peace. And I'm sitting there and the Holy Spirit told me, He said, tell them about the sea. Tell them about what Jesus did around the sea. And my first thought was, I better seize the day about what Jesus did around the sea. I was like, wait, I better seize the day. Like, it just hit me. I was like, seize the day, double meaning, seize the day, like go out and do it, get stuff done, but seize the day surrounding the sea. So I packed up my chair, went straight back to my phone. I said, I got to write this down. I cannot forget this, what God had told me. And so I took the next couple hours. I'm reading through the Gospels, and I came down to 7 main teachings that Jesus taught around the sea, according to the Gospel of Mark. And so what it really became is how Christians are supposed to live, what we can learn from Jesus and how we are supposed to live. And I believe this is the framework for the Christian life, what we are called to do. And if you do these things, see what God will do. See what I did there? You're going to hear a lot of these terrible puns all throughout this series. But as we go through the Gospel of Mark, there's a couple things we need to remember. The first is that Mark is less concerned with the details, but he's more focused on a call to action. Basically, here's what Jesus did briefly, and here's what we should do. His account is a lot shorter than other accounts of stories, so that others can find an easy call to action. It's mainly written like a sermon. It was a simple account. It's focused on the conversion of the common Greeks. It wasn't about getting everything out on paper, but Jesus did this so He can be trusted. And it's simple enough that a common person can understand it. That's why Mark was writing it. And it gives us enough evidence to convince other people that Jesus is the Messiah, but he tells readers how to live and act based on the life of Jesus. The second thing we need to remember is that Mark was one of Peter's disciples. He was basically the secretary of Peter. And so when you read Mark, know that you're reading the account from Peter and from Mark. There's going to be elements of Peter's account, and there's elements of Mark's account. Peter was a blue-collar worker. He was a fisherman. And Mark was more white-collar. He was a scribe, a writer by trade. And so Peter wouldn't have known Greek very well, and Mark was well-versed. No pun intended. So in Greek, due to his occupation, he was good at doing this because he knew these words. He knew how to translate from different languages. And so what we get is a beautiful account of God using two very different people to bring the good news to the world in the Gospel of Mark. So today we're going to be reading from Mark chapter 4, starting at verse 35. It says, "That day when evening came, he said to his disciple, 'Let us go over to the other side.' Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. And there were other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, don't you care if we drown?' He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, 'Quiet, be still.' Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, 'Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?' They were terrified and asked each other, 'Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him.' Jesus said to his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.' Jesus knew that this miracle couldn't happen on this side of the sea. In literary terms, this is called foreshadowing. You've been given the knowledge beforehand, but you don't know it's important unless you know the author. The author is in control of the story, and they do have an advantage, but they are giving you the advantage too if you know it, if you take time to realize it. The information is already there, and you have to know the ending so that you can know why it was important. I had very bad reading comprehension. I always tested bad. I'm not good at reading things. I usually, I'll read the mail and read emails, but sometimes I'll have to have Jen decipher what it says to me. And if I don't understand what's going on. But I can read a whole book. I can love the book. It'd be life-changing for me. But somebody asked me what the book said, and I'm just like, I have no clue. I don't know what it said. I know it was important. I know there's a couple things, but I don't know exactly what it said. I get it in my heart, but it doesn't stay up in my mind. You can understand something in your heart, and understanding something in your mind is way different. You can feel it, you can understand it, but until it goes into your brain, it doesn't stay there. So I have bad reading comprehension. And in school, they would always have you take accelerated reading test, or they called them AR test. So you'd read a book, you'd go on the computer, take the test. It would give you questions about the book that you had just read, but I never passed the test. I was never good at it. I understand the big picture, but when they're asking me, what color shoes was this person wearing, or what happened between this person and this person, I'm like, I couldn't tell you. I understand the big picture, but I don't understand the details in my heart. But I don't understand either one of them in my mind. And I really have to try harder to understand what I'm reading so I can get all the information correct. And we have all the information we need right here. And right here, Jesus says, he says, let us go over to the other side. That's all we have to know. This is foreshadowing. When Jesus says, Jesus provides. If Jesus says go, that's where we should go. Jesus said to his disciples, that's all we have to know. Where Jesus is, the end is already provided. Where Jesus is, the sacrifice is already there. Where Jesus is, there is freedom. This is an element of choosing where to look. Are you going to leave the shore, or are you going to be left behind without Jesus? Are you going to step into the boat, or are you going to stay on the shore? Are you looking at what's ahead and staying on the shore, or are you stepping into the boat? Are you looking at what's ahead? You're just like, I don't know if I can do this. Or are you going to step into the boat, even with your questions, even with your doubts, and you step into the boat? It's an element of faith here. And here's why we can understand the foreshadowing. Here's why the disciples should have had enough faith. From when Jesus called the disciples until he said, "Let us go over to the other side," the disciples should have had faith for whatever Jesus called them to. From Mark chapter 1 until here in verse 4, Jesus drove out an impure spirit. He healed Simon's mother-in-law. He drove out demons. He healed a man with leprosy. He healed a paralyzed man. He healed a man's hand. It says a shriveled hand, likely like cerebral palsy. And after all of these healings, all of these things, Jesus starts teaching in parables. And he's telling them all these things. He's showing them that he can be trusted. And the parable that Jesus had just taught right before they went over to the other side, before he said, "Let us get in the boat to go to the other side," he taught the parable of the mustard seed. He's saying it's small, but when it's planted, it becomes the largest of all garden plants. In other Gospels, Jesus said that if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. And after Jesus finished teaching the crowd, he went more in depth with what the mustard seed means. And I wish I could be sitting there with the disciples hearing what he actually had to say about the mustard seed, but we only have the parable. And it wasn't time for everyone else to know what that mustard seed meant, but the disciples who were further along, they needed to know this for the next part that Jesus was going to teach them. He didn't need to teach it to the crowd. He needed to teach it to his disciples. It's like when you're playing a video game and you come to a point and the game saves. You're like, okay, I've come up to something. And there's this guide that will come up and give you a short phrase and give you provisions for the next part of the journey or the next part of the game. And Jesus is giving them this lesson, and he gave them what they needed for the next part. Like the game saves. He gives them this lesson. He tells them what they need. And then you're supposed to go and do it. The next part's going to be difficult, but foreshadowing, you already have what you need. And we all have questions. What if the boat doesn't float? Or you're looking at it, you're like, ugh, the algae that's sitting there right close to the boat. I don't want to walk through that to get in it. Or what if I fall into the water trying to get into the boat? Or what if the boat sinks in the middle of the sea? I'm sure those are questions that these disciples had. But what Jesus wanted to teach the disciples, they had to go to the other side of the sea. Staying on the shore was not an option for growth for them. If they stayed on the shore, they were not going to be following Jesus. It was the other side that the disciples needed to be on so they could be taught. Verse 36, it says, leaving the crowd behind, they took him along. Just as he was in the boat, there's other boats. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. And that shows you how much Jesus was not worried about this storm. Sleeping on the boat while a large storm came. It's raining, it's storming. Jesus is probably getting wet, sleeping in the stern of the boat. There's waves crashing over the boat. And Jesus is just sleeping. He was not worried about this storm. I remember there was a flight that I was on. We were coming back from New Orleans and flying to Indianapolis. And it was our connecting flight from New Orleans to Memphis. And I remember the sky got dark even at about 20,000 feet up. We start turning. We're turning, just a normal turn, like you know how it feels when you're in a plane. And then I look over, I see the top of a tornado, like 1,000 feet or a couple thousand feet below us. And we're making that turn, and a huge gust of wind hit us and turned. And we were facing about like 12 o'clock. You're going straight, you're turning. And imagine like you're sitting there and all of a sudden you're at 2 o'clock. My face hit the window of the plane. And after a very turbulent descent into Memphis, we're landing. And because all of the turbulence, when we landed, the beverage cart starts rolling down the aisle. Pop cans are flying out of the cabinets. Pop is spraying all over. One of the flight attendants, her wrist broke when a can hit her. And we come to a complete stop, and everyone starts clapping for the pilot. And an elderly gentleman woke up because of the clapping. He just starts clapping too. He was asleep the whole time. He had no clue why we were clapping. He's out, he's snoring. He just wakes up like, well, I guess we're all clapping now. Like I don't know what's going on, but he slept the whole time. And this is what I imagine Jesus was doing. He was so unworried that he slept through the whole thing until the disciples woke him up and said to him, they said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. And sometimes I'm just like, I wonder if Jesus is just like, I'm just going to go back to sleep. Like, I'm sick of these people. I'm just going to calm the sea so I can go back to sleep. That's how I would have done it. I know Jesus was teaching them something. But it must have been quite the storm because most of these disciples were fishermen. They've been through storms before. So this must have been quite the storm if the disciples were afraid. I mean, do you remember the foreshadowing? Do you remember the foreshadowing, the mustard seed that Jesus is talking about? The faith that they needed to have, the healings that had taken place, the miracles that had taken place. He's saying, you should know by now. The disciples should have known, but this is the first time the disciples had to encounter a storm for themselves. It wasn't just someone else being healed, but their faith was put to the test. Verse 40, he said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Haven't you seen me come through every single time? Haven't you seen me heal people? Do you still not understand who I am? Do you remember the mustard seed? You must have no faith because all it takes is a little bit of faith. And if I, Jesus, asked you to get into the boat, to go to the other side, why do you think I would take you out there just to let you drown? Like, hey guys, let's get in the boat." And he starts rubbing his hands together like an evil villain. He's like, "So I can drown them." And that's contrary to the behavior Jesus had already shown them. I'm going to heal all these people, but let me take these guys out to die in a storm. That's not who Jesus was to anyone. Verse 41, they were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Like, what did we sign up for? Who is this guy? This person might be a little crazy. And the disciples were afraid of the storm and that they would drown. The disciples were terrified when Jesus calmed the storm. They were afraid of the storm and then terrified at the miracle of the calming of the storm. And this is the big question I have is, why were the disciples so terrified that Jesus calmed the storm? It seems like they should have had the opposite feeling. It seems like they should have had joy, relief. They would just been, "Oh, thank goodness that's over." And here's why I think they were so terrified. It was the realization that Jesus is the Messiah. And that's a terrifying realization. Because when you realize who Jesus is, you realize you now have to take a stance. It's either all Jesus or it's all yourself. If you follow Jesus, it's no longer about your wants, your desires, your wishes. There's no in between. Like, I'll keep my foot on the shore and one in the boat. It doesn't work like that. I've seen enough fail videos to know that once you put your foot in the boat, it starts moving. If you try to have both one on the shore and one on the boat, or one on the dock and one in the boat, you end up falling in the water if you don't move quickly. It's no longer one foot in the boat and one foot on the shore when you realize who Jesus is. It's all or it's nothing. And I've been a pastor long enough to realize that this doesn't work having one foot in each camp. I see when people try to have it both ways. They say, Jesus is God, but then on the other hand, they also act like they are God. And it fizzles out every time, whether it's a year or in the middle or the decades in the middle. They're stuck in a stance between the middle, and it's a choice that makes you fall in the water. And here's why. When you trust in yourself and something happens, you trust in your own power. When you trust in Jesus and tragedy comes, you trust Jesus with the end result. You have the foreshadowing. You know what he's done. He's already gotten you to this point. He's not going to leave you. But when you have a foot in each camp or a foot in each, or have a stance in each side, and a terrible situation comes, you blame Jesus and are left in the water. Jesus said, a kingdom divided will fall. Abraham Lincoln said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. It's all or it's nothing. And here's where you could find yourself today. There's one of 5 options you could be in today. And the first one that you may find yourself is that you're not even in the boat. You're just standing on the shore. You have no idea, like, I don't think I'm getting in that boat. I'm not sure about Jesus. I have questions. I had a bad experience with a Christian. And for you today, ask your questions. Go to counseling. I go to counseling. In the church, we do mess up sometimes. Some people do it on purpose and have labeled themselves a Christian without the work that goes into it. And some people have genuinely made mistakes, and I'm not excusing those mistakes. It happened and it's terrible. But we've all made mistakes and hurt people knowingly or unknowingly. And I'm sorry that you've been hurt. It's terrible to be hurt by someone, and let alone someone who proclaims to love Jesus. So if you're not even in the boat, ask your questions. Jesus is not afraid of your questions. You could be on the second one. You have one foot on the shore, and you have one foot in the boat. And this is a word of warning. You will fall when trouble comes. In Revelation, there's a letter that's written to the church of Laodicea. It says that you're neither hot nor cold. You are lukewarm, so I'm going to spit you out of my mouth because it's not useful for anything. You're giving half to 2 different things. Like iced coffee is good and hot coffee is good. Just room temperature coffee is just like, oh, I had some yesterday and I was just like, I don't even want to drink this. It hurts my stomach. Cold food is good. Cold pizza is good. Hot pizza is good. Just kind of like sitting there, like in the middle. Like it's not melted, but it's not cold. And it's just kind of like, ooh, it just kind of hurts your stomach. Cold versus hot water. Like cold water is good to drink and hot water is nice for bathing. Like anything in the middle, it's just kind of like, it's not good. I don't want this. And so the word of warning is don't waste your time going half on 2 things. Go all in or don't go at all. The third place you could be in today is that you're in the boat, you're going through a storm, and you're afraid. And that's okay. That's honesty. But I challenge you to go through your life and write down every single thing that Jesus has helped you through. I challenge you to go through your life and write down everything that you have been through. And then in another column, I want you to write down how much Jesus helped you through each situation. And when you get done, I bet you will see how much Jesus was there through every situation. It comes down to our level of faith that we have in Jesus. For us to get to that next step, we have to remember the foreshadowing. If Jesus got us through this, he's going to get us through this. If Jesus got me through this illness, he's going to get through me this next part of life that's difficult. If Jesus helped me when I had our kids, and now we're sending Ellie to kindergarten. He's going to help me through that too. If he has gotten you through this part, you can trust him that he's going to get you through the next part. He's not just going to send you in a place and just be like, figure it out. If he's asking you to do it, he's going to help you through it. You could be on the fourth step. You're on the other side, but you're not with Jesus. You somehow managed to get to the other side, and it reminds me of John Madden. He was a player, he was a coach, he was a commentator, analyst, all these different things. But John Madden always took a tour bus to every single city that he went to. He would never fly because he was afraid. Yes, he got to the place when he was supposed to be there, but he didn't do it the way everybody was told to do it. He took his own tour bus because he was afraid of flying. You're on that other side, but you didn't do it the way that Jesus wanted you to. Yeah, God, I'm going to trust you, but I'm going to walk all the way around the lake. Like, I'll get there when I get there, but right now I have to do this my way because I'm too afraid to do it how you asked me to do it. I don't want to go to the other side of the lake on the boat because I'm afraid of what will happen. And the last place that you could be today is that you're on the other side with Jesus. If you're on the other side of the sea with Jesus, you need to go back to the other side and bring someone along with you. If you have already made that journey, you've been through things that Jesus has said, you need to do this, and you've got through it, and you remember the foreshadowing, you have faith that you need to get back in the boat, go to the other side, and pick somebody up who is afraid and come and help them along with their life. Help them find out who Jesus is, why he can be trusted, that they can ask their questions, even if you don't have the answers, that they're able to ask their questions. And that's what the discipleship pathway is about. We talk about it a lot. The discipleship pathway is not just for you to teach somebody, but it's for you to teach them how good God is and that he can be trusted. And that every single situation that you go through, you can help them see, like, I see this happening in your life, and here's what it's going to become if you follow through with Jesus. I see that you're afraid right here, but I want to help you through this because I had nobody. I was by myself. And now I have somebody and I'm able to help them through it. Somebody helped me through to get to the other side. So that's the 5 places you can be. Is that you're just standing on the shore, that you're in and out of the boat, you're on the shore, you're in the boat, or you're in the boat and you're afraid, you're going through stuff, or that you're on the other side, you got to the other side, but not the way Jesus asked you to do, or you're on the other side with Jesus. So that's where you can be today. So today, as we close today, here's the takeaways. Here's the takeaways that you can remember for today's service. Is that you have to remember the foreshadowing. When Jesus says, let us go over to the other side, that he is not just going to leave you and say, figure it out. If Jesus says, let us go over to the other side, that he is going to make a way for you to get to the other side. And the second thing you can take away from today is that it's all or nothing. If you're doing things halfway in 2 different camps, you're going to end up falling. It's all or it's nothing. And we have these wristbands that say all in that we talked about many months ago. And if that's something that you want to do now, you're taking a stand today that we can bring you a wristband. We'll find out a way. Just message us or comment, put it in the comments, say, I want to go all in. Can you help me and give me a wristband so I can go all in and remember? I want to go all in so that I am with Jesus. And for some of us today, you have been all in and you might have forgotten. It's been months ago that we talked about it. You might have forgotten that we have gone all in as a church, that I'm giving everything to Jesus. Everything we do for the next full year, that we're going all in as a church and see what God does. So today, remember that Jesus is faithful and that Jesus will get you through to the other side.